Most people who say they love God keep choosing lust, not because they lack faith, but out of habit, out of addiction, out of convenience, because pleasure is quick, easy, and accessible. But God requires something the flesh hates: surrender. And on the battlefield between the cross and the flesh, not everyone is willing to die in order to truly live. The question is, why do you keep going back, even when you know it's wrong? Why do you keep trading God's presence for a few minutes of pleasure? In this video, you won't hear easy answers, but you will discover deep truths. I'm going to show you why lust has become the greatest secret idolatry of this generation, and how to break that cycle with truth, presence, and spiritual identity. If this topic already confronted you just through these words, leave a comment below. I choose the cross, not the flesh. Write it as a declaration. Because sometimes the first step to winning a war is recognizing which side you want to be on. It doesn't require covenant, doesn't demand waiting, doesn't confront your pride. It presents itself as freedom, but silently binds you. God, on the other hand, calls you to something the flesh hates, to deny yourself. And that's where many stumble, not because they don't believe, but because they don't want to die in order to live. Jesus said, "If anyone wants to follow me, let him deny himself, take up his cross and follow me." Matthew 16, verse 24. Lust says the opposite: follow what you feel. Follow your desire. And whoever follows desire without a filter, sooner or later falls into the abyss. This isn't just about morality. It's a war for control, flesh or spirit. You don't fall because you're weak. You fall because you stopped resisting. The flesh will always prefer the pleasure that comes easy over the holiness that demands sacrifice. It's more convenient to sin and ask for forgiveness than a fight to remain pure. But every time you choose the ease of lust, you're telling God, "I want your love, but I'm not willing to give up my comfort." And that is divided worship. True freedom begins when you acknowledge the weight of your choices. There's no such thing as an accidental fall when there were warnings, a way out, and the word already in your heart. Want to overcome? Start praying before the temptation, not just after the fall. Build a spiritual atmosphere stronger than your emotional triggers. And remember, resisting today is planting authority for tomorrow. Those who don't learn to deny the pleasure of a moment will spend years repeating cycles. You don't defeat lust by trying to be strong. You defeat it by dying to yourself, dying to the right to do whatever you want, dying to the desire to please yourself. Because only those who die with Christ can rise with him. And lust has no power over someone who has already died to this world. You don't have to wait, don't have to build, don't have to give up anything of yourself. It only asks one thing: that you surrender. But God, he doesn't work on impulse. He shapes you over time. And time reveals where your heart truly is. This is one of the most overlooked parts of spiritual warfare: pleasure versus purpose. Lust offers instant pleasure. God offers eternal purpose. But this generation has been taught to run from discomfort and chase quick relief. The problem with living for pleasure is that you never grow up. The system knows this. It gets you hooked on instant gratification to weaken your spiritual resistance. And the more you get used to the speed of pleasure, the more impatient you become with God's process. You start thinking the Bible is boring, prayer is too long, fasting is unnecessary. And without realizing it, you trade depth for distraction. You trade the altar for the screen. But hear this: God doesn't reveal himself in pleasure. He reveals himself in perseverance. It's not hard to get emotional during a worship service. What's hard is staying pure when no one's watching. That's where heaven looks to see who's ready to carry real purpose. Because whoever trades purpose for pleasure trades inheritance for crumbs, like Esau did. Want to overcome lust? Start finding joy in God's process. Pray even when you don't feel a thing. Read the word even when it doesn't all make sense. And instead of chasing immediate pleasure, seek the joy of knowing you're right in the center of God's will. Most people struggling with lust aren't just chasing pleasure. They're trying to escape an internal void that was never healed. Rejection, abandonment, comparison, past trauma, all of it becomes empty space. And lust shows up like quick relief, an emotional anesthetic. But it doesn't solve the problem. It only delays the pain. The problem is that sin never comes alone. It enters like comfort, but leaves with a high cost. After the pleasure comes the heaviness. After the fall, the emptiness grows. And this cycle, pain, pleasure, guilt, shame, keeps repeating until your spirit is worn out. You're not addicted to sex. You're addicted to escaping something you still haven't faced. Jesus didn't come just to forgive sin. He came to heal broken hearts. Luke 4 verse 18 says, "He has anointed me to heal the brokenhearted." As long as you keep hiding your wounds, you'll keep looking for comfort in the wrong places. But when you bring your pain into the light, God begins to heal. And healing starts when you stop pretending you're okay. Want a practical step? Take some time to write. Yes, write about what hurt you, what still hurts, what you avoid remembering. Then pray over it. Bring it to God honestly, even if it stings. And if you can, talk to someone mature in the faith. Not just to vent, but to be restored. You don't have to keep using pleasure as an emotional crutch. The Holy Spirit wants to be your comfort. The Word wants to be your foundation. And God's presence wants to fill the space that addiction has taken over. But that only happens when you stop hiding the pain and start letting God in. Lust doesn't come just to make you sin. It comes to make you forget who you are. You are chosen. You carry a calling. You were set apart with a purpose. But when you're trapped in cycles of pleasure, guilt, and shame, you have no energy left for anything else. Lust steals your authority, silences your prayers, dims your vision. It doesn't need to destroy you. It just needs to keep you distracted. You think you're fighting sin, but in reality, you're being spiritually shut down. Your mind becomes cloudy, your discernment fades, and you stop hearing God's voice. Days turn into weeks, weeks into months, and the time in for kingdom work becomes a personal battleground. Meanwhile, the world remains in bondage, waiting for someone who was supposed to be on mission, but is stuck in a fall. The enemy knows he can't remove your calling, so he works to keep you from walking in it. Paul wrote in 1 Corinthians 9 verse 27, "I discipline my body and bring it under control, so that after preaching to others, I myself will not be disqualified." This shows that even those most used by God must stay alert. Because if you don't discipline your flesh, your spirit gets deactivated. And if you're ruled by your own desires, you lose credibility to set others free. Want to break free from distraction? Then return to your mission. Start with small acts of obedience. Revisit what God already told you to do, and do it. Serve, fast. Get involved in something bigger than your pleasure. You'll realize that the more active you are in the kingdom, the less room there is for addiction. Because a soldier at war doesn't have time to play with fire. You weren't saved just to feel good. You were saved to set others free. And hell knows that. That's why, as long as you're distracted by pleasure, you're absent from purpose. But today is the day to reactivate your identity, your vision, and your spiritual authority. Because the kingdom isn't waiting for perfect people, it's waiting for available ones. You go in searching for pleasure, but come out emptier than before. Because what starts as an escape ends as a prison. The soul gets weary. The mind grows heavy. The spirit feels distant. And there comes a moment when even the pleasure doesn't satisfy anymore. All that's left is exhaustion. The Bible calls this broken cisterns that cannot hold water. Jeremiah 2 verse 13. It's like trying to quench your thirst with sand. With every new fall comes more frustration, more discouragement, more feelings of failure. And the more you try to fill that void with stimulation, the more drained you feel. Because lust was never made to satisfy. It was made to consume. Meanwhile, God is saying, "Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest." Matthew 11 verse 28. God's presence doesn't numb you. It heals you. It doesn't deceive, it reveals. And when you start feeding on the Spirit, your hunger for pleasure begins to fade. Because a heart filled by God no longer begs for crumbs. You need to stop living in survival mode. Life with God isn't just about resisting sin all the time. It's about being so full of Him that sin no longer fits. Seek fullness, not just relief. Seek communion, not just protection. Trade 10 minutes of addiction for 10 minutes of deep worship. Try it. The Holy Spirit doesn't just want to pull you out of the fall. He wants to fill you until you overflow. If lust has been draining you, it's because your soul's tank is empty. But today can be the day you start refueling at the right source. Jesus said, "Whoever drinks the water I give them will never thirst again." John 4, verse 14. The choice is yours. Be consumed by the flesh or be filled by the Spirit. Did you realize this fight was never just about sex? It was never just about desire or temptation. It has always been and always will be about choice. Lust is the bait. Your identity is the target. And every time you give in, you reinforce a narrative God never wrote for you. But understand this, your fall is not your identity. God still calls you by name. There's still an untouched purpose waiting for the day you decide to stop running. You already know what you need to do. Now all that's missing is the courage to obey. So take a deep breath and make a choice today. Delete that content. Walk away from a trigger. Fast. Send a message asking for help. Go to a secret place and pray. Even if it's a simple, raw, tear-filled prayer. God never rejects someone who surrenders with honesty. And before you leave this video, drop a comment saying, "Today, I chose His presence." Because speaking out what your heart is deciding is a spiritual step. And sometimes God is just waiting for your first move to begin lifting you up. If this helped you in any way, share it with someone else who's in this battle. There are more people fighting in silence than you think. And if you want to keep receiving clear, deep, and spiritual direction, subscribe and turn on notifications. Here, we're not talking about religion. We're talking about awakening.